Oh.
Good morning.
Well, let's kick off then with Mr. Cheerful and have everyone anxiously stressing over their Weetabix and cornflakes this morning as we move on to the perhaps most important question. Are we about to see and experience impending doom and a recession,
I'll
Emil?
just jump right in.
Yes, good morning. If you're not drinking coffee, that'll wake you up.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm of two minds. There's the question of whether or not there's going to be a recession and a recovery. But we could discuss that later.
So let's talk about the optimistic stuff later then, shall we?
Yes. More importantly, is there going to be an economic slowdown? And I think that seems inevitable. If we look at leading economic indicators from Japan, such as machine tool orders, or Germany, new manufacturing orders, or China, new export orders, these economic accounts reflect more about the broader world than they do about the individual countries. And those indicators are very poor. They're at levels last seen 10, 12 years ago during the recovery from the Great Recession. So, and it keeps getting worse. It's not getting any better. More advanced economic accounts such as PMIs, which is a little bit more sentiment-based than the actual hard numbers of these economic accounts I just mentioned, those are also generally lower, generally around the world. So it appears that we are heading into a downturn over the next few months.
But a downturn is distinct from a recession or not?
Well, how does one define a recession? Is it two negative GDP quarters in a row? Is it just very poor economic activity that's still positive, but I'm going to say pathetic and just barely above zero? It still counts as poor, below expectations economic activity, and I think that is almost inevitable. It's hard to see how that's not going to happen.
Okay, now there's a rumour that one of our other co-hosts wrote a blog about recessions and such like, and for those of us who don't understand what a blog is, let's go over that particular point. But what did you, what were your words of wisdom on this subject then, Amy?
Yeah, I was trying to just kind of write some words of comfort for my clients, and I'm not necessarily on the all positive train either. I think there are several problems. Number one, the ongoing trade war with China, the uncertainty surrounding Brexit, and honestly, the interest rate situation and deflationary pressures from everywhere else in the globe that makes this point in time very, very difficult. And from my standpoint, the U.S., which historically has kind of driven global GDP, and even kind of whatever happens to the U.S. happens to the rest of the world, is not the case currently. You know, the U.S. has had strong employment growth, pretty stable earnings, and really been able to keep their inflation level about 2%, which is really a healthy economy. And so we would like to be, I say we, the U.S., would like to be raising rates, but the rest of the world won't cooperate because of the rest of the problems that are plaguing both Europe and the nonsense tariff situation that our president is waging.
Your president, steady on.
I am an American. It's a problem, I know, but I think we'll probably talk about the trade war in a bit. But without the ability for us to raise interest rates, because the rest of the world continues to want to demand those dollars, we're going to be sucked into the rest of the U.S. will be sucked into the rest of those deflationary pressures around the world, which is why we saw the Fed drop short-term rates last week, which at the time seemed almost crazy because the justification was we have to do this because the rest of the world is doing this. But that is the case. The U.S. does not exist in a vacuum, regardless of what Donald Trump says.
I don't know if it's interesting or worrisome. I saw a statistic, or a chart rather. The Federal Reserve in the U.S. is made up of a number of different sub-organizations based in different cities. And the New York Federal Reserve, which is responsible for controlling the banking sector, amongst other things, has a well-regarded research arm, an economics research arm. And one of the indicators that they publish periodically is something called a recession predictor. And I saw the latest publication they had come out with, and it's currently showing a probability in 2020 of a recession of around about 35%. The indicator has never been higher than 35%. So even when we went into the 2001 and the great financial crisis, it was at the same percentage level. And it's never not predicted a recession when it's been at these sorts of levels. So that says to me there's really, really big problems ahead if it's never actually got worse than this and it's at that same sort of level. And the last two times it's been at that level, we've had untold of doom. That makes me a little bit nervous. And then I'm listening to you guys. That makes me a little bit more nervous. So does anyone have anything reassuring to say on this particular subject, or would you leave that one there and hope no one was too scared by this?
Well, I would like to jump in and just say that it's possible, it's plausible, that we will simply experience a shallow downturn in economic activity. And if there are no shocks, let's say through the end of this year, then we will be at a point where perhaps economic actors take a look around and see, okay, there was a slowdown, there was no shock, there was no systemic upheaval. Let's explore economic opportunity from here. Perhaps this was as bad as it gets. So there's always the possibility that it would simply be a shallow slowdown. I say that's plausible, but improbable, because there are so many economic, financial, monetary, political, social imbalances that seem that when you're in a slowdown, the chances of any one of those tipping over are greater. When your economic momentum is good, you can move right past any economic imbalances. Anything that goes off kilter, you can just keep charging ahead. But when your economy is slowing, that's when the probabilities rise that something could knock you off course and that shock could occur. So,
now you mentioned the word shock, and it's a word that is often used by economists and financial commentators. They say there's a shock to this system or a shock to that, and it causes things. One of the obvious shocks that has been talked about a lot in the past, 2 years, has been trade wars and trade disruptions. And people have said, well, if you impose tariffs, if you cause stress amongst the global financial system, that will cause a shock to the economic system, and it will cause slowdowns, it will cause recessions, it will cause chaos. But the average person who's living around today and living and working, there's been this shock, and yet nothing has seemingly happened as of yet. What are they missing? Are they not missing anything at all?
Well, from my perspective, the trade war has really just been a series of threats, and the U.S. markets, at least, and the global markets in response have responded to the threat and then the news of trade war or trade talks breaking down, and then 2 days later we pop back up, bounce back on news that trade talks have resumed, and I do think that this is Donald Trump's MO, and this is a threatening situation. We're about to go into an election year next year, and so my belief that Donald Trump is going to actually allow these $300 billion worth of tariffs to happen with China, I would like to believe, on a positive note, that is a little bit of posturing, and for whatever reason, the market in the last week has started to take both sides at their word, whereas before I think that it was just a little bit of back and forth. But as of about last Thursday, it feels like the market is taking this possibility that there could be a full-out China versus the U.S. Trade war happening. But I think there's still a lot of time this year. There's a lot of time next year where some of that could come back around. But yes, the U.S. companies are very dependent on trade with China and trade with the rest of the world to continue that growth.
And Emil, trade wars, is it an issue, or is it just something that will just get swept away by massaging through profits in companies?
I believe that trade wars are symptoms, not the cause of the underlying disease. And the underlying disease is the lack of liquidity in the global financial system, the lack of recovery by the financial system, specifically depository banks, commercial banks, investment banks, shadow banks after 2008. They were scared to death after what happened, and they never recovered. They never reacquired that perspective that reward outweighs risk, and it's these institutions that provide liquidity to the global financial system. And by withdrawing such liquidity, trade wars are a natural outgrowth because economic activity is shrinking. When the economic pie is growing, trade wars make no sense. But when the economic pie is shrinking, it does make sense to grab that biggest piece of the pie in a trade war.
But don't trade wars, if anyone studied a modicum of economics, one of the first things you learn is a trade war generally results in higher prices, which are bad for consumers, or results in lower profits. And there have been tariffs. So your point is well taken, Amy, that a lot of it has been posturing, but there have been tariffs imposed, and yet no one's really sensed or seen that. Inflation's still subdued, consumer spending is still healthy. So why hasn't that had that shock to the system so far then?
Well, I don't know if the trade wars have actually kicked off yet, but if they do, it doesn't. History shows us that trade wars are not lose-lose for everybody. The countries that have deficits, current account deficits or trade deficits, and have a large pool of underemployed or unemployed workers are the countries that best profit during a trade war. It's the countries that have trade surpluses that are at greatest danger. So that's perhaps why the United States and the United Kingdom are pursuing trade war-like policies.
And to break that down, what you're saying there is that the US is a classic example of a country that is actually importing more than it tends to export in physical goods. It has on the service side, it exports services, but in physical goods, it imports more. So if imports and trade actually is impacted, it is impacted less than others because it's actually importing from others. So others who are exporting are suffering more than those who are importing those products, is what you're saying.
The United States and the United Kingdom have more demand in their economy than their economy is capable of supporting. They have so much demand, they're looking to the rest of the world to supply, to balance that demand.
Hence the negotiating tactic, I suppose, of the US government or the US administration with respect to it feels that is a plausible way that it can beat up others because it knows that others will fear exactly that point, presumably.
I read a great line by Michael Pettis, one of our Cayman Investment Forum speakers, and he had a great line that summarized it, saying trade deficit countries hold all the best cards in a generalized trade war, but that doesn't mean they know how to play them well.
Well, I think we need to take a pause and have a quick break. I'm looking at the producer. Yes, indeed, we do. So hold that thought, Emil, and rejoin us in 60 seconds.
Money Sense, the only personal finance radio show in the Cayman Islands, hosted by Simon Caudry from the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
This is Money Sense.
Welcome back. In the first half of today's show, we sought to answer some of your burning questions, and we will continue to do so in the second half of the show. We talked about the risks of trade wars. We talked about the probability of recession. Now I want to turn to a question which is another perhaps symptom to to use your words, Emil, interest rates. Are we at risk? What are negative interest rates? First of all, there's a concern in the general population that these things are bad, but then people who borrow money would think, well, it can't be that bad if I actually have to pay, if the bank pays me each year. So what exactly are negative interest rates? Are they to be feared? And just help us understand a little bit about those things. Who wants to take that?
I can start, but this is a deep topic. So negative interest rates. So when you go to the bank, obviously you borrow money. The bank offers you an interest rate. You have to pay back not only the money that you want to borrow, but also interest. Everyone kind of understands that. So the idea that the bank would ultimately charge basically tax on savings in this case, which is ultimately designed to help people not continue to save and try to spur them to spend. The other way that negative interest rates metastasize is that governments are basically borrowing money at negative interest rates. So say Germany, for example, wants to borrow money, they will issue their debt for more than what they're basically going to be paying back. I have no experience directly with why anyone would buy negative interest rate bonds, which is, in my belief, why more demand for the U.S. dollar and U.S. debt has been spurred. And I also have not seen this negative interest rate environment or policy work. So that would be my number one observation is, why are we doing this? But please, Emil, help us with this.
Well, Amy is Dr. Amy. She's a doctorate. So her answer was very detailed. I will just try to bring it down to my level, which is it just doesn't make sense. Negative interest rates. You don't have to be a financial professional to realize that negative nominal interest rates simply don't make sense. And indeed, in the book A History of Interest Rates, which covers 5,000 years of interest rates by Sidney Homer and Richard Silla, they concur. There has never been a moment in human civilization at which point negative nominal interest rates were a policy. It doesn't make sense. It's nothing more than a signal that something is wrong. Something is wrong with the system. You don't have to delve into understanding how these things work. It's just a sign something is not right here. And Amy, to your point, why would anyone buy negative yielding German debt called Bunds? Why? Because of a liquidity crisis. Those are some of the deepest markets in capital markets, our sovereign debt markets. And by owning these assets, you can get out of positions. You are liquid. You can sell them off to anybody. And when we see a liquidity crunch taking place is when we see people, large institutions move into these sovereign bond yields. So that's what's, I believe, is happening. We're seeing it not just in Germany, but we're seeing it across all 6 of the biggest sovereign debt bond markets. We're seeing them plunge. Why? These are very liquid, very safe instruments. You're not worried about making a return. You're just worried about making it to next week.
And perhaps we need to clarify what we often mean, what is meant by the term negative interest rates, because someone sitting at home listening to this could be thinking, I'm currently paying prime plus 2% on my mortgage, so 5, 6% or whatever the number might be. Wouldn't that be lovely if it was negative? The bank would be paying me, but don't get ever so slightly ahead of yourself. That's not going to happen. What it means is that if you're actually depositing money in a bank, the bank's going to basically tax you and actually give you back less at the end of the year than you put in because of negative interest rates. There's no way, and I'm going to be a little bit blunt here, there's no way in hell they're going to actually charge you negative interest rates on your mortgage. So what it does is it discourages people from actually keeping savings.
The central banks believe that by doing this, it'll encourage economic activity and consumption.
By making it so scary to hold money in cash or in savings that you must spend the damn stuff. Otherwise, it's going to become worth less at the end of the year. So what I'm getting from there is, if you're sitting at home thinking, oh, it would be lovely if there were negative interest rates, my mortgage payments would cost me less, that's just not going to happen. Negative interest rates are a symptom of really bad things that are out there in the world. So if you start to see that being talked about in plausible terms in the US, be very, very scared. Well, that's uplifting. We have now about 7 minutes to go. You mentioned something in your answer to the interest rate question, Emil, which was a book that you had referenced. And one question we had in, which my computer's now gone completely blank, but one of the questions which I think I remember coming in was books and learning about financial markets and economics and such like. What books can we recommend? What books would we recommend? Would that book be worthwhile? Either of you take that one.
Yeah, I've obviously learned most of what I know from books, and both books and participating in investing is the best way to learn. When I think about my favorite books about investing, my favorite book is A Random Walk Down Wall Street by Burton Malkiel, but it is a little bit technical and a little bit long. So if you're looking for something that's a little simpler to read, I'd recommend The Little Book of Common Sense Investing by John Bogle, who is the late founder of Vanguard. And it is a very easy read and a very small little book that can fit right in your purse, and I like that. What about you, Emil?
I don't have a purse, unfortunately. Not even a European carry-all for men.
Isn't it called a merce for men?
I'm speaking.
We'll get you
I'm
one.
speechless.
Maybe like a beach bag or a fanny pack.
Yes, a beach bag. That means I need I can carry a slightly larger book. And the one I'm thinking of is Market Wizards by Jack D. Schwager. So Dr. Amy was mentioning more about the book she was mentioning. It seemed more like long-term investing, kind of a bent. While the book that I just mentioned, Market Wizards, is a review. The author goes and interviews some of the best traders in business at the time. And they all have different styles, different interests. And so if you read this book, if you're interested in trading, you can read this book and get a sense of the different styles, different asset classes, and then you can pick what you're most attracted to. What about you, Simon? What would be a book you would recommend?
Well, this is going to be awkward for me. I haven't read a book on investing for a little while. I'm too busy reading books on the Large Hadron Collider and discovering the origin of the universe rather than.
I thought that was a hedge fund, but you're saying that's physics.
Yeah, more. I'm reading that sort of stuff. I'm taking the longer perspective. I'm going back to the Big Bang. You've got books on 1,000 years of interest rates. I'm going back to gravitational waves and what's really out there.
I'm impressed.
I don't know if that's the right word for it. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left. Budgeting, Amy.
Oh, geez, the B word.
Should we do budgeting? Now people are so scared about the impending recession and doom that's laden. I think people are out buying bunkers and farmyard and planting crops for Armageddon. But budgeting, should they still consider this in the light of what we've been talking about?
Well, I mean, if it all goes to hell, then you won't need that money anyway. So, but yes, so budgeting is very important, and especially on this island. It's very expensive to live here, as we all know, and there's always pressures to go to brunch or anywhere else. But usually when people are like, how do I stick to a budget? How do I start a budget? I usually say to start with writing down what you think you're spending on what. So just sit down, make a list and say, I'm spending this much on eating out, I'm spending this much on groceries, I'm spending this much on gas, et cetera, and go all the way down with what your paycheck is. Then actually go to your bank account and see actually what you did actually spend. And you will probably be blown away with how different your thought on what you're spending money is versus what you are actually spending money is. And then you should make your budget off of those two lists to actually make a realistic budget that you could actually stick to.
I went through this process just recently, and you're absolutely correct. I was stunned by how much I spend on food.
Mm-hmm. That's almost always the thing that surprises people is how much they eat out and how much money they've spent at Wendy's for me. I try to only eat there once a week. It's good.
I don't know if we're necessarily advertising far. There are other fast food restaurants available for listeners. Moving on swiftly. I guess she is American. Anyway, one
is perfectly delicious,
as are other fast food restaurants, I'm sure. One last question. We are, as always, a little bit short of time. A question that has been asked is: would business conditions and opportunities be improved in Cayman if Cayman moved its time zone to East Coast time all year round? At the moment, we have the quirk where it seems that we are incapable of learning how to change our clocks, and we move randomly from New York to Texas. Nothing wrong with Texas or New York, but it does seem a little bit peculiar.
Or Oklahoma, depending on your
there's
perspective.
definitely issues with Oklahoma. And the simple answer to that question, dear listener, is undeniably, indubitably, unambiguously, yes, it would be better were we to do that. And it's nothing but ignorance and stupidity, which means we don't.
Are you trying to incite riot on the
I
radio
say,
show?
God bless Cayman for not flipping their hours back and forth. They're the ones that are not moving. It's the rest of the world that's flip-flopping back and forth, making up time zones. It's a miracle, and I love it. And
Yeah,
thank
well,
God.
we will agree to disagree with a degree of vitriol that will befall you shortly, Emil. Now, ordinarily, as I wrap up this show, we say that time is short and we wish we had more. Obviously, as we are now people asking and answering, or answering the questions you've asked, we're very glad time has run to an end, and we no longer face the anxiety and stress of having to answer any more questions, until next time, of course. Whether we've actually successfully answered your questions, only time will tell. But if you have more, please, of course, email us or tweet us at Money Sense Radio. I think we do have a little announcement before we depart, don't we, Amy, with respect to a forum that's coming up. Do you have some details on that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think Emil alluded to one of our speakers last year, but all three of us at this table, along with the CFA Society Cayman Islands, are involved in the 7th Annual Cayman Investment Forum, which will be held on October 17th at the Ritz-Carlton, hosted by Simon Condry. Very excited. Oh, how did I not tell you about it yet? You can learn more at www.caymaninvestmentforum.com, and listeners of Money Sense can get a 10% discount by using the discount code MONEYSENSE, all caps, one word.
Well, we love our discount. So caymaninvestmentforum.com, discount code MONEYSENSE, and it is October
17th.
The 17th. With that, thank you very much for joining us. Join us in 2 weeks' time. It's been a pleasure having you with us.
This is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
And now, more Money Sense.
What shall I have for breakfast?
How about a little je ne sais quoi?
Oh, hi. Who are you?
Je m'appelle Toast, French toast. And you can have me for breakfast, ma chérie.
You had me at French toast.
New French toast breakfast sandwiches have landed at Burger King. Choose sausage, bacon, or ham with egg and cheese squeezed between delicious French toast for only $3.99. Only at Burger King, 7 Mile Beach, Waterfront, Town Center, Walkers Road, and Red Bay.
Shopping Superstore, making your dollar go further with huge savings and no membership fees. Get more of the things you use every day at the right price. But it's not just grocery and health and beauty. Priced Right has a full range of products from office to automotive, patio furnishings to kitchen appliances, and even electronics. And since warehouse prices mean savings for you, everything is priced right at Priced Right, Grand Cayman's warehouse shopping superstore.
Access to information.
Your community, news and information. Radio Cayman is your choice, your voice for today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
With your latest news, I'm Karsley Fuller. OSH, the inspections unit of the Department of Labor and Pensions, is investigating a workplace injury after a man falls 20 feet at the Vela 2 construction site in South Sound. According to the Ministry of Labor, the injured man fell and was conscious but had a visible head wound when emergency services arrived at the scene. He was rushed to the hospital in Georgetown and was undergoing treatment when the OSH inspectors arrived. The matter is now under investigation by the DLP. Cayman gets its first blood bank van.
This started March last year. We did the first ever mobile blood drive at Car City, March of last year, and we got donated 58 pints of blood. Today, after that meeting where we did the first initial blood drive, we met with HSA, Ms. Judith, and the rest of the HSA team in the blood bank. We said, what else can we do to build upon the success? And after many, many long hours, long nights getting this all sorted out, we came up with this solution. So this is a Suzuki APV van that we donated.
Taylor Foster with Car City says the donated van will improve safety and ease the transport of essential equipment and materials for mobile blood drives. The Cayman Islands Blood Bank, along with the Health Services Authority, was on hand Wednesday to receive the donated van from Car City. And the Utility Regulation and Competition Office wants to hear from you as they publish their proposed consumer protection regulations. Radio Cayman's Paula Cow reports.
The consultation period, open through August 30th, give operators, the general public and other interested parties an opportunity to weigh in on the draft regulations which relate specifically to the fuel sector. The document addresses topics such as the retail and non-retail sale of fuels, handling complaints, billing and quality service standards. For example, Part 2 includes a provision that will mandate operators adopt a new size and coding system for the nozzles, designed to improve local fuel quality standards. There are 8 consultation questions that relate to the 7 parts of the draft regulations, as well as a general quality for you to mention any other matters you consider relevant to the consultation. If you'd like to submit your thoughts, you are encouraged to email consultation@offreg.ky. For Radio Cayman News, I am Paul Akal.
Now with a check of international news, here's the BBC, which will take us out of the newscast. I'm Karsley Fuller from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
BBC News with Jerry Smith. UN scientists have warned that intensive farming to produce meat and dairy products is increasingly fueling global warming. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says it believes ever-increasing consumption of these foods is causing soils to release carbon previously trapped underground. The international energy company Chevron has started operating one of the world's largest carbon capture and storage plants in Australia. The $1.7 billion facility will inject more than 100 million tonnes of carbon dioxide into a deep reservoir under an island. The former president of Kyrgyzstan, Almazbek Atambayev, has cancelled a protest rally in the capital Bishkek and has called his supporters back to defend his residence on the outskirts. Mr. Atambayev's supporters fear a second raid to arrest him is being planned. 6 soldiers captured in the first raid on Wednesday have been released. The initial attempt cost the life of 1 soldier. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is scheduled to address the nation later today to explain why the government changed the constitution and removed the special status of Indian-administered Kashmir. Pakistan has suspended all bilateral trade with India. The Russian government says 2 civilian specialists have been killed and 6 other people injured in an explosion at an unnamed military facility in the Arkhangelsk region. Russian media say a naval facility in the area is being used to test ballistic missiles for nuclear submarines. U.S. immigration officials say they're interviewing nearly 700 people who were arrested in the state of Mississippi during what's believed to be America's largest immigration raid in a decade. About 600 agents surrounded 7 chicken processing plants at locations near the state capital, Jackson. BBC News.
What's happening in your community? News and information, music and more. You can find us. www.radiocayman.gov.ky. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Radio Cayman is your choice, your voice for today's biggest news. Radio Cayman.
There are plenty of reasons to be a Logic customer. There's lightning-fast internet connectivity. There's the great overall customer experience. And now, you can improve your Wi-Fi connectivity with Logic Boost Wi-Fi for free. With Boost, you can extend your freedom to stream, game, and download seamlessly anywhere in your home, like your patio or your underground lair if you have one. Sign up now for any Logic Bundle package and get free Boost Wi-Fi for a limited time. Visit logic.ky for details.
Do you have a business in the tourism industry? The Cayman Islands Department of Tourism wants you to get listed on their website. Visit CaymanIslands.com. It's absolutely free and will give your business added exposure on the #1 visited tourism site for the Cayman Islands. Learn more and get listed at www.visitcaymanislands.com/sign up. That's www.visitcaymanislands.com/sign up. Don't wait. Sign up today.
The Weather Report is proudly sponsored by Super Stitch Sewing and Fabric Center, your one-stop household store at 39 Pasador Place, Smith Road. Still offering the best prices in town. Call 949-2833 or go to superstitch.com.ky.